So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. Before we get started in the details of the event that occurred last night, I would like to acknowledge a few of the people. We had one victim last night. That we had several shoppers within the Walmart store. We had the Walmart employees. This event is going to impact a huge chunk of their lives for the rest of their lives. So I think it's important that we think about all of them, keep them in our thoughts and prayers, and if you know any of these people, be willing to reach out and try to help them. So that being said, in the midst of a horrible tragedy, there is some key points that I'd like to hit on. The first one I would start with the overnight team lead at Walmart, Heather Moore. Her actions last night, I think, are nothing short of heroic. And I'm going to give you a little bit of what happened there when our PIO, Anna, gets up here in a little bit. She's going to give a lot more details and kind of recover some of this. But at the start of this event, the shooter went into a meeting that they were about to have at Walmart back in one of their break rooms. There were several employees in there, and the shooter walked in. He had formerly worked there. He knew these people and told everybody to line up against the wall. He had a gun in his hand. And then he told two of them to stay in the middle. He ends up shooting a female at this point. And actually, just prior to him shooting the female, as he walks by the team lead, he had his back to her and he was facing everybody else. At that point, the team lead, Heather, took off out the door and she ran and called 911. After the suspect shot the female, there was a male in there that he was also an intended target. He took off running out. Heather sees the suspect going out of the area, so she goes back in the room. The victim is in there. She helps get the victim up, gets her out of the room, takes her into another room, locks the door, turns off the lights, and hid behind some computer equipment. After the suspect didn't catch the other guy he was chasing, he came back to that break room, went by the window of the other room, was looking in, trying to find the female, and I have no doubt that he was going back to finish what he started, and we would probably have a dead victim today instead of one that's alive. So in my eyes, I think Heather Moore is an absolute hero. I'm not one that throws out the term hero a lot. I'm not one that throws out my profession as just being heroes because we do it. But that being said, there is a lot of Evansville police officers and Vandenberg County Sheriff's deputies that were in that building last night that are absolutely heroes. I watched a lot of video last night, and everything I saw made me proud of Evansville Police Department and the Vandenberg County Sheriff's Office. You see things from across the country that aren't so heroic. Everything I saw here is exactly what we would want out of a professional police force and a sheriff's office. So I couldn't be prouder. We're going to show some of the videos in a little bit, but everything I've seen was textbook perfect. I think we also need to thank our Vandenberg County Prosecutor Diana Merce and Mayor Winnicky and our detective units from both agencies. They were all in last night for most of the night, some of them all night, going over video, watching things, talking to officers, talking to detectives. So I'd like to thank all of them. I'd like to thank the Indiana State Police, the ATF, the FBI. All of these agencies reached out immediately, showed up on the scene, were willing to help however they could. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Walmart. They have cooperated with us completely. They've been very helpful in this. And in a very tragic situation, there was a whole lot of people that came together and did a lot of good. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Robinson, and then Anna Gray will fill in a lot of the details at the end. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief Bolin. Last night could have been so much worse, and I am incredibly thankful to the quick response that the Sheriff's Office and the Evansville Police Department had. As I said to some of the news organizations last night, we did not wait. We arrived. We took the training that we've been working on for the past 20 years, joint training where we assemble quickly, respond decisively, and neutralize a threat before so that we can reduce the loss of life immediately. And that's what happened last night. I watched videos of Evansville police officers and Vandenberg County Sheriff deputies running towards gunfire. And this is why we do what we do. This is why we're paid to do this, to put ourselves in danger. And if it weren't for the heroic actions of some of the Walmart staff, and as Chief Bowen mentioned, some of the heroic actions of our own police officers and sheriff's deputies, the loss of life would have been so much worse. And so with that, I want to turn over to Anna Gray, who will brief you on what exactly happened last night at Walmart West.
Thank you. First of all, before I forget, thank you all for being very patient. When something like this happens in a community, everyone wants answers immediately. And it takes a long time to get everyone together to get on the same page so that we're giving accurate information. So I appreciate everybody being very patient with us while we developed a lot of details overnight. So I'm going to talk about the timeline, kind of go into that, about the details of exactly what had happened, the information that we know. Officer Maris is going to help me. She's going to be pulling up some body cam footage, and we'll kind of walk through that, talk about that. At the end, we will open it up for some questions. Again, just keep in mind that this is still an active investigation. We are, not even 24 hours into this, so there are going to be a lot of details that will come forward later that we may not know, but we will do our best to try to answer those questions today. So, thank you. Last night, January 19th, at 9:59 p.m., Evansville police officers were dispatched to Walmart West in reference to an active shooter. Dispatch received multiple calls from people inside the store who stated there were shots fired and that people were being shot. It was further reported that the shooter was actively chasing another male inside the store. Dispatch was able to get a good description and eventually a name of the shooter. The shooter was identified as 25-year-old Ronald Ray Mosley II, and we've got his mugshot up on the video here. Although there was some confusion initially about how many victims had been shot, it was determined that there was only one victim who had been shot by Mosley. When officers from multiple agencies arrived on scene, they immediately went into the store. Mosley turned his focus on the officers and fired multiple shots at them on multiple occasions throughout the store. We're going to play a video. This is an officer's dash camera video. It's just a clip from it, but this is when he's arriving. The reason why we wanted to show this is, as you can see, he's one of the first arriving officers, and there are multiple officers already on scene. You can tell over to the right, there's some flashing lights, so there's already multiple officers, multiple cars from different agencies already on scene. And as you can see, officers are running inside the store. They're not waiting. They're not trying to develop a plan. They are just running straight into the store. And that is how we train in an active shooter situation. And as you can see, there's also officers in plain clothes, officers in uniform. We had officers who were off duty at events working, deputies as well. We had officers and deputies responding from home. And we had detectives responding, so different personnel training are working together on this as well. By the way, I want to mention, when officers went inside the building, they had to clear over 200,000 square feet while they were searching for Mosley and searching for victims, and during the times when they were taking gunfire. This is actually from our body cam footage. It's a GPS, and it actually tracks the officer's movement. And so where you see the arrow and then the green box right there, that is actually where the officer started and where he stops. And as you can tell, that is a lot of area in the building. That is searching for, again, the shooter. Those are times when they're taking gunfire from the shooter where they had to take cover and actively searching for him again, and then also clearing the building. They cleared the building multiple times last night just to make sure that we didn't miss any victims and that we didn't, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't a second shooter. At one time, Mosley exited a door that led outside to the parking lot. There were officers who were standing outside near the door, and Mosley fired shots at those officers. Again, that was outside in the parking lot. And this is going to be a video here from an officer who was near that back door.
That's our one big
So just to kind of talk about that a little bit, that's a pretty emotional video. So what's going on inside, there are a lot of officers inside the building searching, clearing, and looking for Mosley at this time. These officers were on the outside perimeter watching the outside doors. The one officer you hear, they say over the radio, shots fired inside the electronics area, and that officer said, this is the door, this goes into the electronics door. She's just shot there before. She was familiar with the building enough to know that door, and I have no doubt that saved a lot of officers from rushing into that back door, going to stand right there. What you don't see in the video because the code is kind of blocking it, but the shooter does. When they say take cover, before he even exits, they say let's take cover behind here because that's the electronics door. The shooter does come out. He sees the officers, and he actually fires rounds at the officers. And thank God they had those vehicles right there for cover. And then they returned gunfire, and then he retreated back inside, which I'll talk about that as well. But so basically, that is what happened, which you can't see at all, but you can absolutely hear what's going on. The way those officers are communicating with other officers who are running up, and they're saying, be careful, he just came out, and, hey, he's in the electronics area. So a lot of communication going on, not just over the radio, but also between officers who were, near each other as well. Again, he retreated back inside the store once they fired back at him. Once he was back inside, Mosley continued to fire at officers, forcing them to fire back. Mosley was struck by gunfire and pronounced dead at the scene. From the time that the first 911 call came out to the time that Mosley was incapacitated, it was about 12 minutes. That seems like a lifetime for officers, but in the scheme of things, think about all the officers on scene searching for him, all the gunfire that took place inside and outside of the building. 12 minutes does not seem very long in the scheme of things for the response there. Officers were inside the building within 4 minutes of the first 911 call. Unfortunately, we don't have an accurate time. We know we heard radio traffic from inside with officers within that first 4 minutes, but we believe it's probably a quicker response than that because a lot of officers just got there, ran in, and they didn't get on the radio to call that they were on scene. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to document exactly who was the first one, but we do know that we had radio traffic in Walmart giving officers an update, and that was within that first 4 minutes. So that's pretty incredible as well. We're going to show another video here, and this is from one of our officers. He's you're going to see his tactics are amazing. Years of experience on SWAT and everything else, and this is what, this is just great. This is what they encountered, and he stays so cool and collected. This is just a great video. We're going to use this for training for sure, but I'll go ahead and let it play out, and then we'll talk more.
Push southwest. Back up, let's go.
Just really quick, it's quiet. If you notice, there's no shots actively being fired. That's why they're moving together. They've kind of slowed down. They're in searching mode at this time.
Female.
And there are customers inside the store at this time and employees as well, so.
Look through that. Right here. Through this. Let me hold that way. Need one. push, push, push. Where's that last shot? Right back there. Sit down. Get out! Drop it! Drop it!
He still has the gun in his hand. He is still alive at this time.
He's down. I'll move it up. Hold fire! Hold fire! He's down! Suspect's down. Start getting the medics in here.
So from there, there's actually officers with him. There's actually officers on, officers, I say officers loosely, it was with deputies as well, other first responders. But they were in an aisle over as well. So it, again, thinking about this, if you notice when things slowed down, when there weren't shots fired, they were searching, but there were several teams of officers and deputies inside at the same time. So not only are they searching for Mosley and victims as well, but there's also other people who are hiding behind things that they encounter. And so there's also officers. We had to also make sure that we didn't have friendly fire with our officers. So that was something. So there's a lot going through these officers' minds. And as you can see, they stay pretty calm and collected through, even when they're taking gunfire. The adult female victim who had been shot by Mosley was initially transported to a local hospital here in town, but was eventually transported by life flight to another hospital outside of Evansville due to her injuries. I believe she is up in Indy is the latest update I got. Also, her condition is that she is still being treated and is in stable condition. However, she will be affected by the shooting for the rest of her life, and as the other victims involved as well, I'm sure. So I don't have a better update on her injuries, but I think that we should all keep her in our thoughts and prayers for sure. Throughout the overnight investigation, detectives were able to learn more details about Mosley. Mosley had previously worked for Walmart. In May 2022, Mosley had been arrested for multiple counts of battery charges against employees at the same Walmart store. Mosley was fired after the incident. He was also barred from the Walmart stores, and protective orders were filed against Mosley on behalf of the victims. Mosley was in Vanderburgh County Superior Court yesterday for a hearing regarding the 2022 battery case. Based on the information at hand, we believe that Mosley was targeting the employees at this particular Walmart store. Detectives also learned that Mosley arrived on Walmart property on foot from a nearby gas station. There was an employee meeting set to begin at 10 p.m. yesterday evening. Employees were starting to gather in the break room getting ready for this meeting. Mosley entered the break room at that time and brandished a 9mm handgun. Mosley ordered all of the occupants of the room to stand against the back wall. One female employee identified herself as Heather, and this is the story that the chief told earlier, but she was able to escape the room without Mosley seeing her. He gave orders to the others to stand against the wall, but a female and a male victim to stay in the middle of the room. Mosley then shot the female victim in the face, and during that time, the male fled the room. Mosley pursued the male and went outside to the parking lot. During that time, while that was going on, everyone fled the break room, and that is when Heather went back in to check on the victim, and no doubt saved her. She, like Chief said earlier, took her out of that room, hid her in another location, and rendered aid to her. He did, I believe the Chief said earlier, he did go back in. Once he went to the parking lot, he turned around, went back into the store, went back to the break room area, and it appeared that he was looking for the victim at that time, but he did not find her. Mosley then saw the responding officers and turned his attention towards them, and that's when he engaged in gunfire with the officers. It was determined that 7 EPD officers and 1 Vanderburgh County Sheriff's deputy discharged their duty weapon. At least 5 of the 7 EPD officers that were involved in the shooting hold the rank of sergeant or above. Per our protocol, the EPD officers involved in the shooting provided a blood sample at the hospital, and their weapons were seized for testing. The officers will be placed on paid administrative leave for at least several days, which is normal procedure. Obviously, these officers have been through a lot, and they need to be at home resting with their families. The EPD peer support team has also reached out to the officers involved in the incident to provide additional support and resources. We have an employee assistance program that is also a resource for our officers. We also learned that Walmart employees will be offered resources through their employee assistance program as well. And I'm sure Sheriff Robinson can talk more about this, but I'm sure they have resources as well for the deputies involved. We have not determined the exact number of officers who responded to the scene just yet, but we know it was well over 70 EPD officers and about 20 Vanderburgh County Sheriff's deputies. There were numerous other responding officers from other agencies as well. Officers treated this situation as an active shooter situation. By EPD's definition, an active shooter is a gunman who is not stationary but is moving through an area and randomly or selectively shooting at victims. The response for an active shooter situation is that officers make immediate entry, locate the shooter, and stop him in the shortest amount of time. We believe that officers responding to this active shooter incident did just that. Had Mosley survived, he would be facing several serious felony charges, including multiple counts of criminal recklessness with a deadly weapon, criminal confinement with a deadly weapon, and multiple counts of attempted murder. I'm sure there would be other charges as well. This was a very tragic incident, and it really rocked our community. While it certainly could have been worse, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victim who was injured, as well as all of the victims who were involved in the incident. The teamwork between the different law enforcement agencies, our dispatch, and Walmart employees was outstanding. And I would like to wrap this up by adding a quote. This is from one of the officers who were involved. She actually had posted this, and it was so heartfelt, and we just felt the need to share this with you all. Last night, on the way to Walmart West, I said, "God be with us," and He was. I've never had anyone open fire on me. That was the first, and a moment I won't forget. I appreciate the training I have been given. To all who responded, to all who ran in, to all who maintained the perimeter, to all who were off duty and ran to help, we are blessed in this community to have such dedicated first responders. I thank you, and I am proud to serve with you. I could not be more proud of my department. Everyone did a fantastic job, as did Vanderburgh County Sheriff's Office. So very, very thankful everyone went home safe, and thanks for everyone's support. At this time, we will open it up to some questions.
The first officers who went in, did they go in on orders from a higher command or under training?
Sure. Yes, there was no order. It was just training. It was shots being fired, you go in. We don't wait for someone to give us that order.
What about ammunition from the suspect? Did he have just the one gun, and how much ammunition did he carry?
Sure, so that's still being investigated. At this time, we do know of the one gun. Detectives have that information, but I don't know at this time.
Has Walmart provided any video footage of the incident?
They have.
Were there any empty magazines found at the scene?
I believe there were, but I don't know how many, so I'd have to get back.
So he did reload.
I don't know if he reloaded. That's something that once we figure out how many shots were fired and all that, that's still being investigated. That'll take a little bit more than a couple days to figure that out. So.
How many officers responded just initially?
Initially, I know there were at least 70 EPD officers on the run card, but earlier I had mentioned that there's a lot of officers who went there off duty and went in and didn't call. So we know it was way more than 70, and that's just EPD alone. I believe the Sheriff's Office at least had 20 deputies that went in as well, and then we had other law enforcement agencies respond. So
Right there at the beginning? 70?
yeah, I mean, right at the beginning, I mean within like the first several minutes, it's hard to determine. We had a lot, and that parking lot was full of first responders within the first 5 minutes, I would say.
Do we have any law enforcement with physical injuries?
We do not. No officers were injured. I should have probably said that, but yeah, no officers were injured.
How do you handle the possibility that customers and employees might be caught in a crossfire?
That's definitely a concern, but, officers are trained that if they pull the trigger, at their intended target. I understand sometimes there's other victims in there, but and that's something to think about. If there's somebody in the way, they won't pull the trigger. I mean, that's a thought process. We train on that all the time. We don't pull the trigger until we're ready.
Do you know where he got the gun?
We don't have that information yet, but that is certainly something that will be investigated.
And our reporter kind of stopped counting at 48 cars last night. Why did the heavy police response?
An active shooter, everybody goes. This isn't something that we get on the radio and say, hey, we have enough help at this time. Everybody responds. And like I said, we had officers who were at concerts. We had a big concert going on downtown with their families. They left that to respond. We had officers who were at home. We had officers off duty and deputies as well. And it's one of those things, you hear that, you go.
Chief, in Sergeant Gray's first briefing last night, she said something that sticks with me. She said, "We go in." Would you talk about that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I covered at the beginning when I say I don't throw the hero term around. Just wearing the badge or the uniform don't make you a hero. But when there's an active shooter trying to kill people and you go running in and you risk your life, that's what we go in means. And I couldn't be prouder. I think we've all seen national incidents where you look at it and you're like, how did this happen? What were they doing? Why didn't they go in? We don't have that here. And I told people back when that happened, I'm confident of our law enforcement in this community, and I knew they would go in. And so it makes you proud when you see it, that everybody going in there. And we've got a ton of body cam video. We tried to play one that showed you the best, but every video I saw was officers trying to find that gunfire and trying to get to it and trying to save lives.
How are the officers doing?
So we talked to all of them last night. They all seem to be doing well. We've offered counseling to all of them where, like she said, we're giving them the 3 days off. Some of them were a little shaken, as you can expect, and I think they'll continue to be shaken. So we're going to stay in contact. We'll keep talking with them, keep offering services, but all of them were in pretty good spirits last night.
Can you talk a little bit about just the sheer size of this investigation, talking about a lot of video that you guys have all viewed, a lot of interviews with people, and I'm sure that is going to continue. And we also, I'm sure a lot of people are curious more about this suspect as far as what were his plans, and I don't know if that's something that you guys can further investigate as far as upon reviewing electronic devices that in his home or anything like that. But can you talk about the scope of the investigation and kind of where it's headed from here?
Yeah, it is a massive one. There is a ton of video to watch. The detectives have a lot of people to speak to. They've spoken to a lot of people already. I'm not sure if Anna mentioned this or not. We know that he intended to do this. He left a suicide note at his house. So he absolutely planned to die last night. And it's really sad when you hear that, know that somebody is in that state, and at the same time it makes you angry. But this is a huge investigation with so many officers, so many supplements, so much video to go through, tying the pieces together. And I mean, a lot of the questions that you guys ask, we think we know the answer to, but we don't want to say it and be wrong. So we really want to complete the investigation and have our facts together before we would go out and say that there was only one magazine or there was two or that this is the only gun. So we have our thoughts from the preliminary investigation, but it's going to take a while to figure out all these things.
How old was the suspect?
25 years old.
You heard that he was in mental health court yesterday. Do you guys know what that hearing entailed or anything?
Prosecutor Murph, would you like to come up?
We'll let the prosecutor's office talk a little bit about that.
Hi. So the shooter was in mental health court yesterday afternoon. By all accounts, it was a nondescript hearing. He would come almost every 2 weeks. He was compliant with his mental court treatment. People in mental health court are receiving treatment for a known diagnosed mental health condition. So he was going to court about every 2 weeks. Yesterday was the status, yesterday afternoon. He did mention he was having some problems at home with a water heater. He was a little bit stressed about that, but the judge appropriately referred him to resources. They have counselors available and resources, so she referred him to that, and that was what happened yesterday.
Was that related to his case from his arrest from last summer from assaulting the fellow employees?
Correct, yes. He was charged in 2022, May, and he pleaded guilty to 4 counts of battery and was receiving treatment through the mental health court. You have to qualify for mental health court by having a diagnosed mental illness and the crime has to be related to your mental illness.
Can you speak to his mental health diagnosis?
I cannot.
Are people in the mental health court allowed to own guns? Is that part of any rules that exist in the mental health court that you know of?
It depends. So only nonviolent offenders are allowed to receive mental health court treatment. So
Isn't battery of violence essentially?
there's certain crimes that are excluded from mental court health treatment, and the crime that he committed of battery wouldn't be one that would exclude him from owning a handgun necessarily. So
Do we know what the battery meant though? What happened? Just basically, when you say battery, what he did?
the battery was involving employees, former employees at Walmart.
Was Walmart security involved in this last night?
No, that's a good question. I don't know if we've confirmed that or not, so that, I'm sure that is something that the detective office knows, since they talked to a bunch of witnesses, employees. But as far as I know, I can't say that for sure. So.
Hindsight is 20/20, but knowing what we know now about this suspect, is there anything that could have been done to prevent this?
Let me chime in real
Sure,
quick.
yeah, absolutely.
If you look up on the board, this is the Walmart relations team, and for questions like whether they were involved last night or not, we direct you to them, and they'll be happy to answer. And then back to your other question.
Yeah, back to that, I mean, always looking back at a situation, yeah, you always think, what more could have been done. I don't know the whole situation, since we still have to talk to people and find out exactly, still trying to piece it together. It's hard to answer that just yet, to find out, maybe there was more to the story or not, so.
It's clearly awful, but to put things into perspective, there are millions of people are shopping at Walmarts today, and Walmarts are generally safe.
Yeah, I was at Walmart yesterday shopping. I never thought that was going to happen several hours later. So, absolutely. Generally, yeah, it's a safe situation. This is one of those things where, again, we train employees. I'm sure, and again, this is something that we'll have to, let Walmart speak on this. But I'm sure they've got some things in place as well for training on incidents like this. That's why a lot of businesses are going to this. But it's hard to predict this, but in the back of your mind, if you just, go through this training, especially for officers, I mean, this is what we train for. And so.
Are you aware of whether or not there are any customers in the store at the time that were involved in this in any way, or any capacity?
As far as involved, there were shoppers in the store. I think there were approximately 40. And just kind of given a rough number, again, still going through video to try to confirm that number, but there was around 40 shoppers at the time. As far as being directly involved, just speaking with them, several of them heard what had happened. No one was injured. No one else was injured by any gunfire to their level of what they actually witnessed. That would be the detectives would talk to them. Again, there may be more that fled before we had a chance to talk to them, so we do encourage that if someone did witness the event, that they do call in and give us that information.
You're not aware of any customers perhaps having a firearm of their own and trying to engage? You're not in no situation such as that?
That situation, to our knowledge, did not happen.
Has anything like this happened before in the community, and when might Walmart be open again?
I don't have the answer about Walmart being open again. Again, this would be this Mr. Croston up here that we have. That would be something he could answer. We did turn the store back over to a Walmart employee, the manager, this morning. Around 5 a.m. is when we were finished with the crime scene. So that'll be up to them. But we, as far as the police department, have released the scene there. As far as having any other active threat situations in our community, we have. There's a couple I can think of. If you ask me the date right now, I can't think of them, but I can certainly give you a little bit of, we did have one at Diamond in Kentucky. It was actually an open air type of active threat, where somebody was out shooting at people, and we had to deal with them outside of a building. So it was similar, but some things were a little bit different. And then we actually did have one at, and if I say this wrong, forgive me, I believe it was at the American Legion. Can anybody, what was it? VFW. We did have that in a couple of years ago. We had a situation like that. I'm sure there's a few more over the years that can't think of off the top of my head, but certainly we've had those situations before. And again, we're constantly training for something like this.
Do you think having a positive or a very well-described identification of run, do you think that was instrumental in preventing any civilian casualties?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think having a description, even a name was a bonus, but certainly a good description going into something like that. You know, we always encourage and our dispatchers do a great job because people call and they're panicking, but they try to slow things down. And what's a description? Because we need to know when we're going in there, who are we looking for? I mean, there's, 100 people running out of the building. Who are we looking for? The suspect could be one of them running out of the building. So yes, absolutely. Having a great description was very instrumental in targeting the suspect right off the bat.
Will Heather Moore be coming forward to tell her story, or be recognized, or do you think she's just enjoying some privacy and rest?
I would say, I can't speak for her for sure. Maybe eventually she will, but I can imagine going through something traumatic like this. She probably wants some quiet and rest for a little bit. She is a hero, and I think we all would love for her to tell her story. That'll be up to her for sure if she wants to do that. I don't know if anyone has any. I don't know if you talked to her directly or not, but so.
I would recommend if you're wanting to try to do that you also go through the Walmart relations, and they could probably help give you an answer to that.
These officers are going to get some time off, of course, but it seems like on a day-to-day basis, officers are responding to either a shots fired call or an actual shooting, and even the most hardened professional officer must be carrying around a lot of daily stress. Can you speak to that and what you all do about it,
Sure.
not after, but all the way through?
Yeah, absolutely. So our peer support team, a little bit more about that. It is made up of our officers on the department who have gone through some type of critical incident. And it's really, again, with our employee assistance program as well for follow-up. But certainly, we don't always have to wait to give an officer a couple of days off to just take a break if they've been through some type of critical incident. It doesn't have to be an active shooter necessarily. It could be any type of critical incident that a supervisor deems as a critical incident. So we certainly try to recognize the signs and symptoms in an officer who may be just experiencing just worn out and needing a break. And then we have our peer support team members who kind of watch for that as well, follow up with those officers. We try to get them resources that maybe help them get back out there, get back on their feet. So certainly that's something that these type of incidents aren't just isolated. Again, you're right. Anytime there's a murder, attempted murder, shots fired, things like that, certainly those are things that we want to check on our officers, make sure they're doing okay. Our detectives as well. I mean, that's a lengthy investigation for them. That can, that wears them out as well, so.
And I can
Yeah, absolutely.
add one more slight thing to that. On top of our peer support, we also have volunteer chaplains. When you're in emergency services, things like this, where your lives are on the line, there is a lot of faith, and there's different levels of faith, different religions, but we have a whole team of volunteer chaplains. One of them's actually in here today, Tyrone Edwards. One of them was out on scene most of the night last night, and they develop rapport with our officers. They get to know our officers personally. Our officers depend on a lot of these chaplains, and they reach out and talk to them and help. So we've got multiple fronts that are there to help the officers get through things such as this.
You mentioned confusion about the amount of victims in the beginning. Could you speak at all to where the numbers started swirling from
Yeah.
as far as 4 to 5 victims, and if that impacts anything?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that's a challenge sometimes is what dispatch is getting and what goes out to the officer sometimes can be confusing. So sometimes we're going to a situation where we think we may know what's going on and things change. In this particular situation, the call came out as an active shooter and that people were being shot, and then at least one person had been shot in the head. And so that's what, officers were going in thinking that. And it didn't change our response. Even if we would have thought that there was one person who is still an active shooter, so that wouldn't have changed anything. But officers were looking for victims. I think what happened was when the shots fired happened, people heard it, and people started running out, and I'm sure people were either falling down, tripping, trying to get out of the store, or ducking for cover. And so I think some people probably heard that, saw people falling, and associated that with perhaps they had been shot. So that was probably where the confusion, but it did come out in the 911 calls. That was another thing that's a huge communication factor is when the first responders go in, they do have to basically assess the situation as quickly as possible to give other officers information of what's going on. So I think that kind of cleared up the confusion. there was still, again, officers were still going through clearing even after the suspect was down to make sure that there weren't any victims that were perhaps injured and couldn't get out to us, victims that maybe were hiding and scared to come out and things of that nature. So officers cleared that building multiple times last night, at least 3, maybe even 4 times, just going through, again, just to be sure that there was no one else inside that could have been injured. So.
On that note, I'm sorry if you already said this, but as far as the employee meeting, how many employees are we talking about that were gathered there for that meeting?
Sure. We were in the neighborhood of the teens, and I may get this wrong, so please correct me if somebody does have that information. I believe it was about 12 employees. 12 to 13. However, there were approximately 40 employees working that night, roughly. So we will, that's something that.
So approximately 80 people in the
Yeah.
store total.
That's correct. And this meeting hadn't started yet, so they were just beginning to gather into the room. And so, yeah, some of the employees, not all of the employees were in that room at the time.
Do you know if there is a conflict of some kind? Generally, you mentioned that the suspect once worked for Walmart and was terminated.
Mhm.
So how was the suspect aware of this team meeting occurring that evening and at that time? And knowing that the people he may have been targeting were going to be at that meeting?
Yeah, so at this time, we don't have any evidence that there was an accomplice. Again, this is still an active investigation, so not to say that could change, but at this time, we don't have any proof of that. But certainly, that is something that we hope to find out as far as that information. And I'm sure detectives are out there talking to people, going through other evidence, and that's something they may find out at a later time.
One slight thing to add to that, the meeting is a nightly meeting, so I don't know how he knew that the individuals he wanted were working that night, but they have the meeting every night.
You said he went there to die. You mean it was a suicide by copying? And if so, why would he need targets?
So he didn't say in his letter if he was going to kill himself or if it was going to be suicide by cop, but it was a suicide note. He made it clear that he planned on that being his last night. I'm not going to get into details of exactly what he said, but I'll leave it at it was pretty heartbreaking.
Why would he need targets?
He's not here to answer that. It would be speculation on my part.
Is anybody injured in the scene? Not that we know of, and that's another reason why we were encouraging anyone who maybe was injured while they were fleeing, probably got home, maybe didn't want to report it, but so, yeah, there potentially could be other people coming forward that maybe tripped and fell or something like that. But at this time, we don't have any indication that there are any other injured victims out there.
With all the lessons learned, do you think that there's any room for improvement on preventing this in the future, either from law enforcement perspective or maybe even from the prosecutor's office as well?
That's a hard question. All we can do is rely on our training. Certainly, there's always, in any situation, there's always room for improvement. We get the luxury of looking back at things, going through video, going back, okay, and that's what we do is we learn from our mistakes. If there were, any, we have to learn from those mistakes. So certainly on our end for training, we're always growing. We're always learning new things. That's a pretty big question to say, can we prevent any type of active shooter? We do our best. Businesses do their best to prevent things like this. All we can do is just train and be ready for something. Yeah, absolutely.
With the advent of body camera technology, which came into common use 5 to 6, 7 years ago, it's afforded law enforcement an opportunity to review instances like this from multiple perspectives, and we'll use those in a training environment. So we'll do an after-action review with the EPD and determine if there were any tactical errors made so that we can learn from those. And we'll have a lot of video to go through to show what exactly happened. And so with body cameras, not only are they helpful in terms of improving the quality of our prosecutions, but they're extremely useful in developing better tactics and learning, as Anna said, from our past mistakes.
Is Westside Walmart inside city limits?
Actually, it is, yes, the Walmart there on Red Bank is city. That being said, and I hope that's okay to say that, but when there's an incident there, especially a big incident, deputies are close by too, and they can respond as well. But technically, it is city.
So since the victim was targeted, we can assume there was a relationship between the two of them.
We don't know what the connection was just yet. We know that they were coworkers, but as far as any deeper connection or relationship, we don't have that information yet.
Was the victim a party of the battery charge from May 2022?
No.
No. Okay, I wanted to clarify and make sure. No.
Do you know if anyone in that meeting room was a party to that battery charge?
I believe there was at least one individual. Do you remember if that's correct? Okay.
With the suicide note, did you have that on him? Did he leave it for someone to find at home?
Sure. So from what I understand, detectives obviously conducted a search warrant at his house as well to try to find any other evidence, and that was recovered at his residence.
One more quick question about that. I know you don't want to go into what was said, but can you say how long it was? Like, are we talking one page? Or
Yeah, it was about a
longer?
page. Yeah.
How long was he inside the store before shots fired?
I don't have that information yet, but it appears that he walked in and went right back to the break room, so I don't have the exact time at this time.
But how long was it that when officers arrived on scene until the threat was neutralized? How long was that?
It was about 12 minutes from the time the first 911 call. That is what you asked, correct? I just want to clarify.
No,
Yeah.
from when the officers.
Oh, from the
arrived on
officers
scene.
arrived on scene that went in. Yeah, about 8 minutes.
Was the victim in a position of management or just an hourly employee?
I can't speak to that. I'm not familiar with what her position was. That would be something that I'll refer you to the Walmart team for that.
What's the thrust of the investigation now? Just trying to uncover what happened? Is there anything beyond
Sure.
that?
Yeah, I mean, these investigations, this is going to be something that there's a lot of whys that we will try to answer. Sometimes we don't always get to answer them. But certainly this is something that, given the situation, this is something that detectives are going to continue to talk to witnesses, speak with acquaintances and family members of both victim and suspect, and anyone else that is involved to uncover maybe if there's any other, connection or any other details that may come out. Especially, there was a lot of questions about the gun and things like that. So certainly those things are going to still be investigated.
Will you guys be sending out body cam footage?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Before we conclude here, yes, the body cam footage that was shown today, and also with the permission of Sheriff Robinson, there was actually some deputy body cam footage that he provided to us. Unfortunately, we didn't get it in time, or we weren't able to pull it up and download it in time to add it to today. But that will be included as well. And so we will email that out. We will also email out the press release and the things that we talked about today, basically. So that will be sent out. If there's any more that you want, there was so many officers on scene. It's going to take us a while to gather that, so please just be patient with us. But we will have that emailed out today. And it will also be on our Facebook page as well.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.